Well, good afternoon and welcome back to Vermont. This is part 3 of the antenna farm series, showing you now where we left off at the end of part 2. So this part 3 begins load testing, as we talked about last time. So the first step I needed is to figure out how much weight is going to be loaded on the antenna. Planning to use a Buckmaster dipole, so I called up the manufacturer, nice folks in Virginia, and they estimated the weight of the dipole to be 6 pounds. And I've got so that's going to hang off the dipole pulley, and I've annotated this picture with the weights. Weighed the UHF VHF antenna that I've got on hand, and that's about 5 pounds. And for safety, or a good measure, I guess, I overestimated the CB antenna at 8 pounds. I'm sure it's probably close to 6 pounds. It's 21-foot antenna. So added weight of fiberglass. And I wrote a note there too, plus probably 5 pounds of coax, 3 runs of coax going up 10 and 20 feet. So just a rough guess. And as I mentioned last time, the first step is to build a Christmas tree or a tree stand for this thing. 1-inch EMT, so I just used a 1 1/8 hole saw, and that almost wasn't big enough, so I just sort of augured that out and wobbled that out a little bit to get it to fit. So here's a scrap piece of plywood on the bottom, and actually a scrap piece of windowsill. It's stuff I had kicking around, painted white. And I'm guessing here at the length of the two retainers on the mast. Again, I'm trying to mimic a tripod. It's a 2-foot model, so I'm guessing that the clamps, the upper and the lower clamp on this mast, will be around 18 inches apart. I don't know. This is just a guess. So that's what I went with here. Next, I put some 2x4s on each side of the upper support so that I could bridge out and get stability on this. Again, I don't want it to move. I want it to replicate a well-fixed tripod that's already on the roof up in Northern Command. So I'll just walk through these pictures. You can see what I'm trying to cobble together. Scrap OSB on the ends to help stabilize it, and eventually tried to level the best, my best guess at getting this level with a 7-foot level in both directions, regardless of the way the earth is and the poor fixture I've got. I just want the mast to be vertical, and once I get that in place, then I try to brace that lower, put some A braces to help lock in place that lower piece of plywood or the lower support. You can see what I'm trying to do here. Just using stuff I got kicking around, so it's not mill standard. So then I needed to find some ballast, and I started looking around the house, and I've got ongoing projects in every corner, and shown here is a battery ups backup. And I've got a couple of these in state of repair. I'm replacing the batteries out of these. So I grabbed one of the batteries and weighed it, 5 pounds. Okay, that's a good place to start. So I threw 3 of those batteries in some plastic bags and draped them off the mast. So you can see I've got 1 on the left and 2 up at the high mast where there'll be 2 antennas as an approximation of the weight of the antenna static. And I just investigated that, and it really didn't do too bad. Everything looks straight. Everything in both directions. I didn't take a picture from the side in this case, but it did pretty well. So of course, in this case, it's static loading. It neglects wind load or icing or anything like that. But I was impressed so far with the performance. Not a lot of flex, fairly rigid. And again, I'm approaching this with an inspection or an eye toward determining whether or not I need guy lines or any sort of truss bridge wire assembly to help stiffen up this mast. At this point, with 10 pounds at the top and 5 pounds on the lower point, I don't think I would need any guy wires. in particular because the dipole that I'll hang off there will be a horizontally run wire thrown over some limbs of trees, and that does a good job of stabilizing in two directions the upper mast. So at this point I'm thinking, well, probably don't need guy wires, and I'm encouraged by that. Well, then I had a even better idea, and of course this video is not sponsored by Monument Farms Dairy, which is a local dairy producer in the state of Vermont. But we had a casualty. I thought, well, I'll use a bit more weight, and I grabbed 3 gallons of milk, weigh 8.5 pounds or so each, and threw those up on the mast. And you can see a picture of that here. I've got 2 gallons up high and 1 off the left lower mast. And that was kind of a trick, getting 2 gallons of milk suspended where I wanted them. It's taller than I am and taller than my ladder, or the reach was comfortable holding a fishing line out there, you know, that upper mast with 17 pounds hanging off the end of it. So I got smart, and I put the pole up dry, if you will, with a rope in the pulley, and I used the pulley. Doesn't that sound wise? I don't know why it took me my 3rd iteration and dropping a gallon of milk to come up with such a wise idea. That's the way I work. Then I almost immediately after hanging these 3 gallons of milk off the mast, it really started to fall over, and I got pretty nervous about that. And I came over to the oblique side here and took a photo. You can see the concern. I'm not sure about colloquialisms, but this up around here we say it's leaning toward Sawyer. You know, tree falling back on you as you're cutting it down. So no matter which angle you come from. So it looked bad. I actually think this is a success. If you look closely at the straightness of each of the masts, you know, the upper mast is deflected some from the lower mast, but they're almost parallel. It's not really bent a whole lot. And you know, from top to bottom, what you can see that's not shadowed by the OSB plywood is fairly straight overall. So there's quite a lot of flex here, and I attribute that to the looseness of the holes in my cobbled up, made up fixture, and that whole fixture assembly flexing around those 2 you know, bored holes that I drove that conduit through. So there is some flex in the pipe, but it's not terrible. And I think, having done this load test, what I will probably do is go make a first install up at Northern Command and hang the antennas as I intend, and just take a look at it there in place rather than simulated here. You know, I've got 18 or 17.5 gallons, I'm sorry, 17.5 pounds hanging off the upper mast, and almost 9 pounds hanging off the lower mast, which are both quite a bit, probably 1.5 times the actual load they'll see. So I think with this I'm comfortable to proceed with no guy lines, and go install this as I intend to, with the antennas in place. And if that doesn't work well, then I'll bring it back down and go from there. So that'll finish part 3, the load test of this mast assembly, antenna farm part 3. And part 4, looking forward to that. That will be installing this assembly up at Northern Command and hanging the antennas in place and taking a look at that. And as always, welcome to Vermont. Thanks for visiting, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a great day.